Oh, for fuck's sake. Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation History number 3. Which is going to be about the Suakin expeditions to the Red Sea port in the Sudan in the mid-1880s. Now, doesn't look like I've got any guests this evening, which is unfortunate since I don't really like doing solo streams, but I will do my best. As always, to give people a chance to get in, I'm going to play us a bit of a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new God's sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for the sword, what's love and heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to God. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly prophet laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come thou to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give what wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
That was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Please go and check out his excellent YouTube channel if you're into some good music. Okay, it doesn't look like I've got any guests this evening, which is unfortunate because I actually hate doing streams on my own, particularly this evening because I got about 50 tabs to mainly for illustrations and maps and so on. But anyway, whatever, we'll try our best. Before I move on, I've actually got a hangover from the stream I did last week. Someone called Novitrix PPR sent me a super chat. In fact, he sent me a test for $5 and then a super chat for $10 US. And he asked me, and this didn't come through last week, which is why I didn't answer it last week. I did actually look for it. Anyway, on the subject of looking inwards, what are each of your thoughts on how many statistics get lost by the wayside or omitted? Curious correlations between increase in Deliveroo's and increase in X. The increase in litter trash is stark in my country. They don't track this, do they? Yeah, absolutely, Novatrix. I think this must have been from our last Splendid Isolation current events stream. And look, all I can say to you, Novatrix, is yes, obviously they do try and obfuscate those sorts of things. They just do. No doubt about it whatsoever. On that note, I will point out that if people have questions they would like me to answer, I will do so at the end of the stream if they put them on Entropy, which is pinned to the top of the chat if you want the address to send anything to. Okay, so that out of the way, let us move on to the subject of this evening's stream, which is the Suakin expeditions in 1884 and 1885. Now, the background to this is the rise of the Mahdi in the Sudan, who was an Islamic extremist and who basically wanted to kick out the Egyptians and then ultimately invade Egypt and even Turkey to purify Islam and all this kind of stuff. So at the time, Egypt was a kind of an independent country, but in 1882, basically because of the enormous amounts of money that Egypt owed Britain, and because the Suez Canal was a pretty vital link for the British Empire, it was by far the quickest way to get from Britain to India, for example, and also Australia. Britain took over Egypt, basically. We will eventually do a stream on the Anglo-Egyptian War of 1882, but this is not this evening. So Britain took over Egypt under the anti-imperialist liberal Gladstone, I might add, but there we go. Then the Mahdi's rebellion broke out in the Sudan, which was basically an Egyptian colony in those days. And the Brits were not, at least at first, prepared to send any troops there, and just told the Egyptians, well, evacuate the place. But of course, given that the Mahdi's Dervish Ansar were all over the Sudan, this was easier said than done. So as a sop to public opinion, Gladstone, who was not someone I'm very fond of in terms of British 19th century politicians, decided to send General Gordon there, and Gordon was probably the only general mad enough to take the job. He had been Governor General of the Sudan prior to this in the 1870s under the Egyptians, when he'd refused about half his salary and had spent most of his time trying to fight against the mostly Arab slave trade, which was absolutely rampant all over the Sudan. And so Gordon went down to Khartoum, which was the capital, to try and supposedly evacuate the Egyptian civilians and the Egyptian garrisons, because basically every time the Egyptians tried fighting the Dervish Ansar, they were getting beaten quite badly. Gordon, because he was a royal engineer, who had also originally made his name in the Taiping Rebellion in China. In fact, he was known as Chinese Gordon at the time. Gordon, because he was a Royal Engineer, was able to fortify Khartoum, and he sent a series of messages to the British government pointing out, look, I'm totally besieged here. I haven't got enough transport to get out the garrisons, and certainly not all the Egyptian women and children down here. You need to come and rescue me. And Gladstone, who was a very stubborn man, despite the increasing clamour in the British press and from the public, wouldn't send a relief expedition until it was really too late. He decided to send General Wolseley, who was one of the better British 19th century commanders. And Wolseley, for reasons that are best known to himself, instead of going from Suakin to Berber and then down the Nile to Khartoum, which was much the quickest route, decided he was going to go all the way down the Nile, and he was going to get Canadian voyageurs and other people and crewmen from West Africa to pilot some of these boats. And and it was about as slow as you think it probably would be when you have to get all these basically rowboats with sails on that are manufactured in Britain and then sent out to Egypt and then reassembled, and then all these different forces from Britain, etc., have to get together, and the army soldiers have to learn how to row boats, and officers have to learn how to navigate them around sandbanks, and it all took a long time, as you probably could have guessed if you'd have had a bit of common sense. And so what Wolseley's backup plan was to have a camel corps, and again we'll do a dedicated stream to the Gordon Relief Expedition at some point, but you need this as a bit of background. He had a camel corps, which was basically a heavy and a light camel regiment, which were formed by cavalry troopers, a mounted infantry camel corps, and a guards camel corps. And again, all these guys had to be trained to ride camels, which none of them were used to doing, surprise, surprise. And that took a while, and there weren't many of them really. And the cavalry dudes in particular, because the idea was they were going to use these camels as mounted infantry. So, you'd move on the camels, but you'd fight on foot. And the cavalry troopers really didn't totally understand holding a firm line in the way that infantry soldiers did. And this caused problems later on. But anyway, as I say, we'll do a dedicated stream at some stage on the Gordon Relief Expedition and the Battle of Abu Klea, etc. But this one is about a backup plan, if you like. The Brits were quite worried about Suakin because it was a Red Sea port, and had the Dervish Ansar managed to occupy it, and of course the Dervish Ansar, they had the artillery, much of which they'd captured from the Egyptians. They had a lot of modern Remington rifles, which again were mostly captured from the Egyptians. And they operated gunboats and what have you on the Nile. And so there was a certain fear in Britain that if the Dervish Ansar occupied Suakin, they would be able to interfere with shipping going up and down the Red Sea. Because, again, once you come out the Suez Canal, you end up going down the Red Sea and on the way to India. And so obviously the British were concerned about this. So they sent an expedition under Sir Gerald Graham to Suakin with instructions to basically avenge a big defeat of the Egyptian gendarmerie at a place called El Teb. And when the first Brits arrived there, Graham fairly quickly went to El Teb and bashed up the dervishes, basically, in short order. They had killed about 2,500 Egyptian gendarmerie only a few weeks before, And the Black Watch were given the lovely job of burying the European officers who were killed there 3 weeks earlier in the desert, which I'm sure was a nice job. So after this, the Brits, by the way, are fighting a guy called Osman Digna, who was a pretty good Dervish Ansar commander. He knew his business. He was not an idiot at all. And he was part of the Hadendoa tribe of the Bija people. And these are the people that Rudyard Kipling called the Fuzzy Wuzzies because of their strange big hairstyles. And although the British had beaten Osman Digna at the Second Battle of El Tab, Graham could see that the enemy was still very strong around Suakin, and therefore decided he was going to attack their main base, which was near a place called Tamai. And so he divided his troops into 2 brigades. Now, let me see if I can get an illustration for this. But where are we? I've got so many tabs open. This is why I was hoping to have a guest who could talk while I was trying to find things. But anyway, no worries. All right, there's no maps on that, so I don't need that. Here we go. Let's see if I can find this easily enough. Boom, 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 boom. There you go, that's the one I want. Okay, this is a map of Suakin and the area around it. And as you can see, hopefully, I think that's as big as I can make it, to be honest with you. Yeah, that's as big as it gets, I'm afraid. As you can see Tofrek, where the first and second battles were. You can also see Tamai, and that's where the second major battle of the first Suakin expedition was fought. And Graham, as I said, divided his troops into 2 brigades, basically, one of which was under Colonel Buller. And Buller, of course, later became famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it, as the first British commander in South Africa during the Anglo-Boer War. But he had also, fairly recently, in 1879, won the Victoria Cross in the Anglo-Zulu War, when he was in charge of a lot of irregular cavalry. Buller was an excellent major. He wasn't a terrible colonel, but he was not a very good general, I think is probably the fairest way to do it. So Graham had the 10th Hussars and the 19th Hussars, 2 British light cavalry regiments. He had the 1st Battalion of the Black Watch, Highlanders, the 3rd Battalion of the King's Royal Rifle Corps, 1st Battalion of the York and Lancaster Regiment, the 1st Battalion of the Gordon Highlanders, and the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Irish Fusiliers. He also had a small battalion of Royal Marines Light Infantry and a Royal Navy Brigade and a few guns. He had 22 guns and 6 machine guns and about 4,500 troops altogether. So anyway, he advanced on, this is probably a better map to use at this stage, hopefully. Right, let's see if I can get this one up. So we'll get rid of that one. And need that one. Let's see how that works. There we go. This is the a battle map for the Battle of Tamai. So that one I still need that, don't I? I think this is the right one. Yes, it is. This is a battle map for the Battle of Tamai. Now, a Zariba, for anyone who doesn't know, is like it's a thorn bush barrier that is widely used in the Sudan. And the dervishes used them as well as the British and Egyptian forces. And they get these mimosa forms. You tie you cut the tree down. You tie the boughs together so they can't be dragged off, and you leave the heads of these mimosa trees and all their forms facing the enemy. And so they're kind of like a primitive version of barbed wire, if you like, that can hold up an enemy who's charging you. Now, at the Battle of Tamai, the 2nd Brigade under Davis got to a big, what's called a donga, which is like actually there they call them something else, a core, I think, which is a dried up riverbed basically, and this caused some confusion. Now, some people say that the Black Watch were ordered to charge into this thing. And some people say that the whole square, the Brits were in 2 brigade squares, were advancing down into it. And as the square was going down the sides of this dried up riverbed, it made the square disordered, basically. And the Black Watch got ahead of the Sioux sides that should have been joining them up to the rest of the square. And the enemy got in between. And there was a lot of very confused hand-to-hand fighting. Bear in mind the British troops were armed with single-shot Martini-Henry rifles, so you had to reload them after each shot. There was a lot of bayonet fighting. The enemy were very good with their great big broad-headed spears and their swords and all the rest of it. And Buller's brigade then came up on the right of the 2nd Brigade and opened fire and helped clear away the dervishes who were intermingled with the British troops, and they probably also hit some British troops when they were doing this. At that point, Graham and the other officers were able to get the square in order again, and then everybody advanced. And 3 naval machine guns that had been captured were recaptured by the Brits. This was the most expensive battle the British ever fought in the Sudan during all the wars between 1884 and 1898. The Brits lost 111 killed and about the same number wounded. On the other hand, at least 2,000 dervishes were killed, and we don't know how many wounded. But even so, the Brits lost about 220 to 230 casualties, and that was the most expensive battle Britain ever fought in the Sudan. So anyway, it was successful, and then, this, by the way, was in early mid-March 1884. And later on, the Gordon Relief Expedition fails. And as a result, the Brits got to Khartoum, but it had already been captured by the enemy and Gordon was killed. As a result of this, Wolseley's forces were just strung out all over the desert. They won a battle at a place called Kirbican on the Nile, but their commander was killed in that battle. The Camel Corps had to withdraw somewhat because there weren't many of them and they had very few supplies. And so Wolseley writes to the government in London and says, well, I think you need to send another expedition to Suakin, and it then needs to build a railway from Suakin to Berber on the Nile, across the desert. And as I said earlier, this was probably the way he should have gone in the first place, but he didn't. But now he says, yeah, no, we should have a railway from Suakin to Berber and from there I can draw supplies, and in the autumn I'll start my campaign against the Dervish Ansar again. So the government sends Graham back to Suakin with the second expedition. And this one goes, in many respects, quite similarly to the first one. It's a bit different. Let's see. What do I want to use on this one? There we go. Is there a map on here? Yes, there is. The main action here is a place called Tofrek, which again I'll get a map up for. So there you go. That's the right one. There you go. On this map, you can see Tofrek, and this is where the second expedition fights its main battle. There were a number of skirmishes in this expedition, which I will talk about a bit in a minute. But their main battle was at a place called Tofrek. The Brits were building a zareba, but hadn't finished it. And this second expedition included some Indian cavalry and infantry, as well as British troops. And these guys weren't used to facing the Dervish Ansar. And at the Battle of Tofrek, it has to be said that because they were surprised to some degree, some of them ran away, or tried to run away. I mean, there wasn't really anywhere to run away, but they tried to anyway. The British Royal Berkshire Regiment and the Royal Marines stood firm and basically stopped the Dervish attacks. Again, this was the same Osman Digna guy who was always in charge in this part of the world. And the Royal Berkshire Regiment and the Royal Marines were the main guys who stood firm on this occasion and stopped the attack. Again, there was a good deal of hand-to-hand fighting with bayonets and this kind of stuff. And I have a picture that I can show people of this, I think. There we go. Let's get this one up. There we go. That's the Battle of Tofrek. I think it's the Royal Berkshire Regiment is mostly being shown there. And these guys, they managed to hold firm and chuck the dervishes out. Anyway. Let me get that off. In this battle, the British lost 4 officers killed, 66 men killed, and 8 officers wounded and 128 men wounded. And the Dervish Ansar lost something over 1,000 men. And it wasn't all that successful, to be honest. Now, to make things a little more interesting, this second Suakin expedition was also the first one that Australian troops fought in overseas. And I should somewhere have a nice picture of this. I hope. Here we go. The New South Wales government, bear in mind, federation hadn't happened in Australia yet. So the various, what are now states, were then individual colonies. And So as a result, the New South Wales government asked that basically offered the British government a contingent of infantry and artillery, and the British government accepted. And so the New South Wales contingent were the first of the many, many thousands of diggers who fought alongside British troops in the Anglo-Boer War, the First World War, and the Second World War, and to say nothing of Malaya and what have you, and Korea indeed. So yeah. So I will show you a picture of the New South Wales Corps, and there's quite a funny story around this. Oh. Screen. Where are we? I've learned my lesson today. If I'm going to use a lot of different tabs, I really do need a guest. So, there we go. Let me see if I can find this. Sorry about the dead air, guys. Oh, here we go. That's the one I want. Now, this is the departure of the New South Wales contingent from Sydney. And you will notice they're wearing very neat red coats. And as you will have seen from some of the other illustrations I put up today, that most of the Brits were actually wearing khaki by this time. The last time the British Army wore redcoats in action was actually in the Sudan, or on the border between the Sudan and Egypt, at the Battle of Guinness. I think in November 1885, certainly in late 1885. And that was probably the last time the British Army wore redcoats in a battle. But by the 1884 and 1885, most British troops were wearing some form of khaki. In these early battles, it was often more grey than khaki, but it was not red. And the New South Wales contingent, when they arrived in the Sudan, were not best pleased to have to get rid of their smart red coats and put khaki on. They didn't like it very much, and many of them complained. So there you go. Some of the New South Wales contingent were formed into a camel corps, who operated patrolling around Suakin. The British, incidentally, always held Suakin. They kept it all the time. Kitchener was a governor there for a little while, the military governor there for a little while. And another interesting thing that I will show people is a warship that you can go and visit today. That actually took part in these battles at Suakin. So let me show people this one. There we go. And there you can see HMS Gannet that was built in 1878. She was a Royal Navy sloop, which was one size up from a gunboat. And you can still go and visit her today at Chatham Historic Dockyard in Kent. And she actually fired her main armament at Dervish Ansar surrounding Suakin and operated in support of the New South Wales contingent, amongst other people. So she's been beautifully restored in Chatham, and she's a really lovely warship. I do recommend people go and visit her. But yeah, she took part in these battles and is still around today, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah. So anyway, there we have. Oh, there was another one I wanted to show people. Hang on, where did I put this? Oh, here we go. Let's see if I can show people this one. Present, share screen. Don't know if that's the right one. Sorry guys, I know this is dead air, not very interesting. Let's see if I can share that. Oops, it's right down the line. Because of course it is. Sudan, that's the right one. It's definitely not that one, but it must be one of these. I think it's that one. Okay. There we go. We have Captain Arthur Wilson of the Royal Navy winning a Victoria Cross. When a dervish charge temporarily overran some of the Naval Brigade Gardner guns, he fought the dervishes hand to hand with his sword and pistol. And as you can see, he managed to break his sword, but he was still using the hilt to punch dervishes. And he got a well-deserved Victoria Cross for that. And I think that's a nice picture. In fact, I once used it as a thumbnail on one of our streams. A long, long time ago now. So, yeah, another little interesting side thing about the Sudan. So anyway, that's basically most of the stuff I had to say. The Brits fought 3 major battles there, a heap of skirmishes. It is arguable if there was a great deal of point to it in some respects, although, as I say, the Brits were mainly concerned about the dervishes not occupying the port and being able to, sail gunboats or what have you from there and interfere with shipping. And so the Brits hung on to it all through the time that the dervishes ran the Sudan, which was for about 13 years. And of course, starting in 1894, Kitchener slowly began to reconquer the Sudan, which ended up at the Battle of Omdurman, but we will do a dedicated stream to this at some stage. The Battle of Omdurman was in 1898, and a British and Egyptian force totally smashed the Dervish Ansar armies. The Mahdi was, incidentally, he died not long after his victory over Gordon, probably from disease. And a guy called the Khalifa took over, who was not so religious, but a bit more fierce. And he was the guy who was actually in charge until 1898. So, yeah, I think that was most of what I had to say. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't enjoy doing solo streams. I much prefer to have someone I can bounce ideas and stuff back and forth with, and I don't like the sound of my own voice all that much. So yeah, this might be a bit of a shorter stream than it would have been otherwise. But yeah, so that's most of what I had to say about this campaign. I didn't want to do another British defeat, and this was not a British defeat. All 3 of the major battles were British victories. Usually with considerably more of the enemy being killed than we lost. But on the other hand, they were pretty expensive in troops. And especially when you take into account those guys who got sick and what have you, they were pretty dangerous expeditions to be on. And also, of course, the Ansar the Dervish Ansar did not take many prisoners. most people will know of Rudyard Kipling's poem Fuzzy Wuzzy, which is specifically about these battles, because the Fuzzy Wuzzies were the Hadendoa Beja people who had these strange hairstyles. And they specifically were the Fuzzy Wuzzies. And so when Kipling was writing about them, he was really writing about these Suakin expedition battles, which were quite famous at the time. Most people, incidentally, blamed Gladstone for the death of Gordon, who was extremely popular. And in fact, Gladstone, who had been known by the initials GOM for Grand Old Man, people switched them around to MOG for Murderer of Gordon. So, and Gladstone rightly got the blame for that, because had he sent the relief expedition a month or 6 weeks earlier, they would have got there in time. There's no doubt of that. But he was an anti-imperialist and therefore didn't want to, and as a result, even more men got killed. I think there's a parallel, to be honest, with his First Boer War policy in 1880 and 1881, when instead of fighting that war to a conclusion, he just pulled out, and as a result made the Second Anglo-Boer War almost inevitable in many respects. And of course, that was a much bigger war that led to tens of thousands of deaths on both sides. But that tends to be what happens with people of that nature, like Gladstone. But I'm not a big fan of Gladstone. Anyway, guys, I'm going to play us out with an appropriate tune. Although the picture from this is actually from the Anglo-Egyptian War. It's not from the Sudan, but it's that sort of era. It's the early 1880s, so it'll probably do. And let's play us out with a bit of a tune. And then I'll see if I've got any questions and that sort of stuff from the audience. Right, there. Good. And that was from the excellent channel Patriotic Archive. The chap who runs it is a friend of the channel. Do go and check him out. It's got some good music on there and what have you. Right, I just have a quick check and see if there's any questions in the chat or anywhere else. No, Orb Reality is saying no, because there isn't a movie about the Suakin expeditions. There's a movie about the Gordon Relief Expedition, kinda, and there's another one which is about the Battle of Omdurman, and they're sometimes mixed up in movies. But yeah, Loafer Shovel says Corporal Jones from Dad's Army called them Fuzzy Wuzzies too. They don't like you up them. Yes, that's very true. Yeah, well, Jones in Dad's Army was supposed to have been the Battle of Omdurman in 1898. So, yeah. Disraeli once, this is Aaron Hook, said, Disraeli once said that GOM stood for God's only mistake. Yeah, Gladstone and Disraeli were not friends of each other. AI Show Homeland says he's stuck at work, which is why he's not a guest. Never mind, that's fine. AI, you can't help being at work, mate. So there we go. But you should check up Rudyard Kipling's poem "Fuzzy Wuzzy." It's quite good. So yeah, I think I've said all I wanted to say. This is going to be a bit of a short stream, but like I say, I just don't like doing streams on my lonesome. I'm not fond enough of my own voice to like doing streams on my own. So yeah, there we go. So we will see you on Saturday with our normal. Oh, what's AI is asking me what do I think about Four Feathers? Four Feathers, which by the way has been made into a film at least 4 times. It's based on a 1903, 1904 novel, I think. Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, the only thing I would say about it is that the idea that a British officer in the 1890s or in the 19th century at any stage would not realize that if he put in his resignation just before his regiment went to war, of course he's going to be accused of being a coward. You know, if your regiment's going to war, you can't resign. I'm sorry, you know, he would be accused of being a coward, and that should have been pretty obvious to him, to be honest. Now, maybe he's not supposed to care about that, but then of course he does. So, you know. But yeah, that's that. I mean, the Four Feathers has got some pretty good scenes in it. As I say, it's been made into a film at least 4 times. And I don't really like the most recent one, which was made by some Indian dude, and in which the Brits are all wearing red coats, which they didn't actually, as I was just talking about a little while ago. So yeah, I don't really like the most recent one, but most of the others, I mean, Storm Over the Nile's not bad from the 70s. There was one made in the 50s, and then of course the original one was made in the 1930s, I believe, and they're all okay. I mean, you know, also Technicolor, and the first one actually. There are real gunboats in it that really were in the Sudan wars. They used gunboats that were still surviving, and also they do say that some of the Sudanese extras might well have forearmed them. So there you go, in the 1930s version. Also, I was going to say there is in the Sudan there is a surviving gunboat that took part in the original, in the 1890s campaign that ended up at Omdurman. That there is a surviving gunboat there. I can't remember her name now, but I have actually used her as a thumbnail on our normal Splendid Isolation streams. So yeah, all right, we'll be back on Saturday, British time, which is Sunday morning for me, with our normal current events, politics and news stream, Splendid Isolation, when I hopefully will have some guests. And then we'll be back next week with another one of these historical streams. I don't know what it will be yet. I'm thinking something naval, perhaps, but I'm open to suggestions by people on my Discord, particularly if they're willing to come on as a guest, because I really don't want to do these streams on my own. It's not my way of doing things. I think streams are better when you've got more than one person speaking, and you can expand on stuff that people might want to expand on, if that makes any sense. Sharp's Tiger, yeah, that's all right. I read that a long time ago. Aaron Hook says he thinks the original version of the Four Feathers is the best one. Yeah, maybe. I mean, some of them use bits of film from each other anyway. So, certainly the first 2 or 3 do. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Do like the stream, please, people, and also subscribe to the channel. It really does help get more people watching us. And also, I'm happy that we're now streaming at the same time on X. That's also really good. All right, guys, we will see you on Saturday. Take care. Don't let the bastards grind you down.